So when we talk about adaptive features, right, this is due to, again, so adaptation is due to natural selection as a result of adaptive features being present in a population. And there's varying degrees of that adaptive feature, right? Big beaks, small beaks, light colored moth, dark colored moths, okay? Now, adaptation then is a process resulting because of natural selection, and it's because the population, based on the alleles that they're expressing, right? The ones that are better suited for that environment will do better. So that is adaptation, the process where those better suited traits ends up existing in that environment. And essentially, this is then evolution happening, right? So a change in that adaptive feature due to a selective pressure in the environment causes that population then to be more present with a certain type of allele, causes that allele to be more present in a certain type of population. So that whole thing, so evolution itself is a result of natural selection. We see this really well when we talk about hominids, so organisms that fall under what's humans, and the change in these structures of hominids over time because of, again, selective pressures that they were faced with. Okay, so you will get to compete in a human evolution, complete a human evolution virtual lab. It's just an optional one. So if you have time after all of this and you submitted your assignment and it's still like Monday of the last week of school, then try it out. Okay, so a really good example of evolution by natural selection is looking at how bacteria become resistant to antibiotics. So there's a learning objective right there. Okay, so just a little bit of a background. You guys already know a lot of this stuff, what antibiotics are. If you ever been sick by a bacterial infection, you would have taken some antibiotics and it can kill the bacteria in all these different ways, okay, as I'm pulling them up. And then I want to talk about then how bacteria actually becomes resistant to antibiotics. I've truncated a little bit, so I'm not sure how far back I've gone here. So let me just go right to here. Okay, so all these different are different ways that the bacteria has become resistant to antibiotics, right? So how they made themselves more resistant, and it's based on, you know, some changes that might have happened in their genetic makeup. So I'm gonna ask your question momentarily. So if you look at these two petri dishes, one, okay, you can see that where there's no bacteria growth versus there's lots of bacteria growth, you can see how antibiotics helps to minimize the growth of bacteria. But again, over time, they may develop a resistance to it. So my question to you guys is, using all the knowledge you now know from topics 17 and 18, describe how bacteria have evolved to acquire resistance to antibiotics. So don't talk about this stuff here, like, it's because they're able to change the permeability, so the drugs can't enter, they can destroy the antibiotic. Not that stuff. I want to talk about the individuals themselves. How was it possible over time bacteria and the population of bacteria could have become resistant to antibiotics? So thinking about what we've been talking about over the last few topics here. Okay, so hopefully your answer had some of this information in it. So if you look here, here's the before picture of the population of bacteria. You can see here the different colors, there are different variations of that population of bacteria, and it shows the different resistance levels. So super, super red means high resistance, the antibiotics cannot kill it, versus like really low, they're going to be killed off by that antibiotics. Okay, I mean, maybe again, that antibiotics cause them to bind together, destroy the cell membrane, etc., etc. Okay, so first thing first is upon exposing that population of bacteria to the antibiotics, that antibiotics acts as the selective pressure. Okay, so certain individuals will do better than others, and those ones that do better will get to pass on their genes. Okay, so now before that even happens, they're just like humans, just like other types of cells out there, during regular normal cell division where DNA has to replicate, there might be natural mutations that happens, right? And this gives rise to those different variation in that population. So ones that may be higher in resistance, ones that might be lower in resistance. Okay, now all of a sudden you expose that population to the antibiotics. The ones that are resistant to the antibiotics, they live on. And the ones that are not, they go and they die off. And the ones that live on, what do bacteria like to do a lot? They like to reproduce. So they're going to go and divide, make more of themselves. And every time they do that, they're passing on that resistant allele, the gene that codes for to make that bacteria resistant to the antibiotics. They get passed on to the next generation, and so on. So that the final population is just showing a very homogeneous population of individuals that are now resistant to the antibiotics. And this is a real thing. This is a big problem. And we have, lots of pathogens out there that are now resistant to antibiotics. So tuberculosis is one of those, right? And then when I think about the fear of And that's not to say to not use hand sanitizer and all those other things, but one of the fears that I have, I'm sure other scientists, and I think I've seen articles on this, is that with the new world that we live in because of COVID-19, and we're constantly sanitizing in our environment and constantly wiping down our hands with antibiotics, well, high alcohol hand sanitizer, we're killing off and we're really lessening the diversity of bacteria that's in our environment. The good ones that we used to fight off the bad ones. We are causing this huge selective pressure to kill off the weaker pathogens and leaving behind those stronger ones that have mutated and have that stronger allele that they pass on to the next generation. It's really an arms race that ends up resulting in us scientists going back, trying to produce new drugs, the bacteria learning from it, not learning like they have a brain of thinking about it, but because of the learned information is because the ones that die off are no longer there, and the ones that are present are the new ones with the highly resistant alleles. Okay, so this is a really, again, good example of evolution by natural selection. All right, I'm going to leave it off